Hello, this is Naveen Somani for the final time. This will be my reply speech, which will be 4 minutes, where I'll be taking side proposition. Before I get into this speech, I'd like to address a few anticipated arguments that I will be clashing with in today's round. First, starting off with the opposition side that I assume would have been made in the 1, 2, and 3. First, restricting publishers' rights undermines the freedom of expression in the marketplace of ideas. Second, that publishers should remain neutral and don't have an obligation to be forced to undertake any actions outside of their jurisdiction. Third, that publishers can always change their minds later or revoke/condemn the initial publishment without being forced to stop all of the media. And as a response, as points to clash with, on the proposition, the 3 main points I assume would have been made earlier in the round are: first, freedom of expression ends when it inflicts violence on others. We still maintain a baseline of freedom, just removing the most violent. Second, that publishers are complicit in injustice, as it sets precedent for the future wrongdoings by not condemning harsh material. And third, the impact, how dehumanization causes violence and suffering, from hateful words being transpired into hateful actions. With that in mind, this 4-minute speech will begin on my first word. Your ballot today is not deciding whether offensive ideas should exist. They will in both worlds. It is deciding the responsibility of powerful institutions when they choose which ideas are heard or not. And when opposition continues to tell you the publishers are just, quote, bystanders, we tell you on the proposition side that they can change the world for the better. Thus, the comparative between our two worlds is what I will prove in this speech, why you are signing your ballot for proposition for 3 key reasons. On the first clash, what does society value more? It is between freedom of expression and moral responsibility. The opposition continuously tells you and wants you to believe that this debate is about freedom of speech, but they fundamentally misunderstand what we've said numerous times. Freedom of expression still exists in the proposition world. Authors still write, readers still read, and governments still cannot censor. The only thing that changes is that publishers refuse to use their own private power to amplify literature that is hatred and dehumanizing. This distinction wins us the debate, because opposition's biggest impact in the round is that simply more speech exists. But our impact is that fewer people are harmed by institutions choosing to legitimize this hatred. But second, the word deeply in the motion makes our reasoning for us. We aren't restricting political opinions or any small disagreements. We are prohibiting deeply offensive media that damages people and are used to incentivize and incite violence. Media that should never see the light of day. Therefore, you push through our analysis from our very first speech that separates moral obligations from rights and freedoms, because your rights and freedoms are limited when it's unacceptable for you to exercise them in a demeaning way. And even taking the opposition at their highest ground, even if you believe there is some value in maximizing speech, that is dramatically outweighed once that speech creates foreseeable harm. That's the first reason the proposition wins. But the second reason asks whether publishers are passive observers or active participants. Opposition consistently tells you that publishers play no role, that they're just bystanders and aren't the ones committing the offense. But we tell you that being a bystander in the face of injustice makes you complicit. When you have the power to stop oppression and injustice and you allow it to continue, you are no better than the abuser. But second, publishers aren't just standing there. They are actively publishing material. They decide what enters bookstores. They decide what receives investment, and they are the ones undertaking this action. In the opposition's world, powerful institutions benefit from influence by escaping responsibility, whereas in the proposition world, we hold publishers responsible and keep them accountable compared to the opposition world, which lets them off scotch-free and sets a terrible, dangerous precedent for the future. But the third and final clash is on which world would you rather live in? Ultimately, panel, this is the clash that decides the debate. Opposition tells us that offensive ideas should be published because society can simply reject them later. But by the time society is forced to reject them, the damage has already begun. Publication gives credibility, visibility, and tells society, quote, this is an idea worthy of attention. And this is how hatred becomes normalized. Once you put power to those words and amplify them, it becomes a catalyst for violence and destruction. They're not simply words anymore. They become violent actions. So let's compare the two worlds, where the proposition side has the humongous impact of harming the most. In opposition's world, the only additional benefit they gain at most is a slightly larger marketplace of ideas and more expression. Whereas in ours, we still have that baseline of free ideas. We're just restricting the worst and hateful violent speech. So when we're weighing this round, it's very straightforward. The publishing of this literature, creating years of dehumanization and creating outgroups, only leads to detrimental violence. About how publishing this propaganda allows for more violence, more harm against minority groups. Weighing that against a little bit more freedom of expression, I'm extremely proud to propose and stand on the proposition side for this debate.